Alright, I'm here to talk about another cameo for use with Shang Tsung. Today we are covering Kung Lao, another one of Shang's good picks. So we're going to go over each of his moves, how it fits into Shang's game plan, what it offers to us, how it can help us enhance our strengths, cover our weaknesses, add some kind of utility to our character. And we are going to start with the spin, his forward cameo. So spin, 23 frame startup, combo starter, knocks our opponent into the air, does 40 damage, and has a couple of interesting properties. Now, the most important thing to know about this move is that it is death on block no matter what. That is negative 15. You are fully punishable and real close to your opponent. It is a very bad situation to fire this on block. Don't do it. Another thing to know is that even though this move is a combo starter, it does not give us ways to start combos off of moves we don't already have combo starters for. In fact, something like this would be the high damage string that Shang does, and it ends up with 375 damage instead of 388 that we do without using the cameo. So, essentially, it ends up with a worse combo that costs more resources. You might hope that this move would open up new combo routes for Shang Tsung, such as comboing off of his 1-2, which you normally cannot combo off of with anything other than a weird round skull route that's kind of hard to perform. But you'd be wrong. You can see that didn't count as a combo. Even just standing one into it doesn't count as a combo, so it hasn't opened up a new route for us. What it has done is given us a form stealer route. Because it juggles our opponent so high into the air, we're able to do a form stealer and then hit them as they are coming down. Unfortunately, this is the strictest timing for any form stealer combo, and you can really only use 6, 7, and 8 frame moves to catch your opponent on the way down. So your combo potential is very limited. Even something like Liu Kang's standing 3, which is 12 frames, or his standing 2, which is 10, will not connect with an opponent after your transformation. So it provides an extra piece of utility, but it is more limited than many other cameos. The other thing to know about it is that it is an invincible wake-up. So we're going to have Liu Kang perform a meaty after knocking us down, and we'll see just how good the invincible wake-up this actually is. As you can see, beats standard meaties. It's still death on block, just like it is before. I think it's worse on block now, but it doesn't matter. It was death on block either way. So, you're taking a gamble with it, using your cameo instead of using your meter to get something like an armored move. And it will still get beaten by double-hitting moves like Liu Kang's forward 4 and things of that nature, Baraka's back 3. As demonstrated here. Yep, Liu Kang's forward 4 beats it. Any double-hitting move like that is going to beat it. But standard meaties that are a single hit will not beat this invincible wake-up. The next move we're going to cover is the weirdest move in his kit, which is his teleport. This is his neutral cameo, and he picks us up, drops us on the other side of our opponent. Doesn't matter where we are on the screen, he's always dropping us point blank. And if you hold it, it can be canceled into air moves, including air specials. So, it has weird niche applications as something that you can do into a ground skull, something like that. You can also just do it into an overhead that leads into a normal combo route. But the most strange property of this move is that it cancels your animations. As you can see there, he pulled me out of my own spin and set me down on the other side of my opponent. Sometimes this can be used to get rid of the recovery frames on my own moves while my opponent still has to eat the block stun. So, On that move, we have negative 17 frames, and Spinning Spikes has 36 frames of recovery. So we can basically gain 19 frames by canceling at the very moment that the last hit of Spinning Spikes connects. And if you're good at doing it, that means that you could create a block string doing something like this that may or may not be real. It's a little bit hard to tell with how many frames the teleport is active and then when I'm able to cancel into my overhead. So opponents may be able to jab you out of this, but the first hit of Kung Lao's, or the first bit of the animation rather, of Kung Lao's teleport is also armored. So you can see if your opponent tries to hit you back with a quick move, you might still end up on the other side of them, and you might still end up ready to do something like that while they're still in the middle of their own animation, and you can catch people and juke them that way. If people have seen it a couple of times, they're probably not going to fall for it, but it does happen. The next application of this teleport is going to be creating Oki pressure. So when you end your combo the way you typically like to, you can now use the teleport to go straight into another combo, starting with an overhead. And that overhead is a jump in, which means that it can be canceled into another overhead like that. Or if you're old Shang, you can cancel it into a low like that and lead to a full combo off of an overhead low. And you could cancel it. You could just not cancel it and go into a throw. Or just not cancel it and go into a low. So it's given you a bunch of Oki tools that Shang normally doesn't have. Because of how long it takes your opponent to wake up from your normal enders, which are either Spinning Spikes, getting 39 frames of advantage, or Injection, where you're getting 18 frames of advantage. This move starts up in 8 frames and is active for 13, and when you cancel it, you can cancel right at the tail end of it. So you have 21 frames there, and your opponent has 18, which means that you can do this overhead much faster than your opponent could possibly wake up and do anything. And then if they go to block the overhead with an up block to try to punish it, you can do a throw instead. Or you can do a low, or you can do a mid, or whatever. Once your opponent starts respecting the overhead, your options open up a bunch and you can start mixing them. However, if your opponent does up block you successfully, you're punishable because this is a jump in, same as normal. And if they read that you're not going to do the jump in and start attacking, then they're going to punish you as well, because the teleport has a lot of recovery frames if you don't do the cancelable version. So it's a dangerous mix-up, but it is a mix-up, and it is a real one, and it can really get people. So the other thing it does well is that it's just a teleport. If you're full screen and you decide you want to get in, you did this, and now you just say, okay, I want in, you can do it. Unfortunately, Shang really likes to play full screen, so the teleport is not usually something you want to do. Bring yourself closer to your opponent when you have them in the spot you want them. The best use of this in a combo might surprise you. It is true that off of Triple Skull, if you have Motaro's teleport, you can do Triple Skull into teleport and then keep the combo going. So you can get a full combo off of Triple Skull from full screen. That is not true with Kung Lao. Kung Lao's teleport takes too long, even when you cancel it, to get a combo off of Triple Skulls. But you can get a combo off of EX Injection where you leave your enemy restand. But what you have to do is use EX Injection for 2 bars. So, you can do a normal ender like Injection or Spinning Spikes to get a lot of frame advantage and put your opponent full screen at the end of that combo. Or, you can go into your skulls, your straight skulls, to get a restand ender and lead into more pressure. Like that. And then, if you micro dash forward a little bit, you'd be in range of the overhead, or you're just actually in range of the low. So you can keep the pressure on your opponent. That restand does not jail for long enough to guarantee your low. If you end with the double skulls, you have about 9 frames of advantage. This low is 19 frames. This overhead is 23. These are not guaranteed, but you do have some frame advantage, and if you want, you could just keep firing skulls too. So it's an option. It's a very expensive option, and if you think it's going to kill your opponent, it's probably worthwhile to do the restand into more pressure. So teleport has its uses, but it is not something that is deeply desirable for Shang. It can also grab you while you're jumping and give you a little bit of armor, so that if somebody's tossing a projectile at you, you could try to armor out of it that way. And it's also relatively quick in general, so if somebody's tossing a projectile, you can sometimes punish them by teleporting in a timely manner. Usually not on reaction on a read. You can usually get away from the projectile on reaction, but you probably won't be able to punish them unless you did it on a read. So, the final move is the move that everybody is here for, Buzzsaw. And Buzzsaw kind of does it all. Buzzsaw is his back cameo. It's a low. And one of its coolest features is that it recharges crazy fast, as you can see. Probably the fastest recharge in the whole game. And it's a low projectile. It hits from full screen. Do it anywhere we want. As you can see, it's got good hit advantage, even up close. It's got good hit advantage. So, even if we did something like this, we'd have a lot of hit advantage. In fact, just enough to come in for the low. So if they just get caught with that, keep in mind that you've got them jailed into a low, which can lead to a full combo. But what most people want to do with this is not just toss it out at the end of block strings. If our opponent's going to block, the hat is safe. -3. Leaves us point blank. But it is no longer plus on block like it used to be. And even when it was plus on block, Shang's fastest mid is 13 frames, and it was only +3, so we didn't really get the capability to go wild. We were just going to do a jab or a poke after anyway, or maybe try to throw. But it can be held as long as we have Kameo meter, and this means, as you can see, it was +109 frames if he blocks it after it's being held. And we can hold it for variable amounts of time. We can change it up. And what this means is that we can do a bunch of setups. Now, there are setups that everybody in the game can do, like low hat held into this overhead into the low, or we can instead do the low into the overhead. We can go low hat held, release, and then go into the overhead. And now we have a mix-up that's basically a 50-50. You don't know what's going to hit first, the low or the overhead. And if you get caught by one, then you'll get comboed. So, that's always possible after wake-ups, and every character in the game is capable of doing something like that with Kung Lao, including Shang. And you can use it to make block pressure. So you can go set it up, then go into your highest damaging string, right? And make yourself plus on block, because they had to block the low hat at the end of the string and then just go into the string again. And of course, this is possible with any character as well. Shang doesn't take incredible advantage of this. Shang's best chip damage comes from this, spinning spikes. And spinning spikes animation is long enough that you cannot do it and then let Kung Lao's hat rip. So you're going to do like a staggered version of a string. You're probably going to do this and then let the hat rip. You're probably going to go set up hat, like that. And that's about as good as you're going to get in order to generate plus frames from him. You could, of course, you can do it as young Shang, too. You could go like that, and then lead into another string. And that's fine. It's block pressure, but it is block pressure that you basically need to have hit your opponent in order to start. Either that or your opponent needs to be just kind of sitting there respecting you while you set this up. It is pretty quick, so if your opponent's moving in, you could go like this, and then start that up and go into more pressure. But it is not something that if you're point blank with your opponent and you just ended a string that you're going to be able to do. So you can't start a string and then decide you want the pressure and fire the hat. You need to have set up the hat and then go into the string and then get the pressure as the hat's charge is running out. Fortunately, the recharge rate is very quick, so it's something you can do often, even though it's something that requires a little bit of setup. The thing that it's really doing for you, though, is enhancing your zoning game quite a bit. When Shang is full screen and old, the hat comes out quick, goes across the screen quick, low projectile. Love it. It also combos into Ground Skull, as you can see. And if it combos into Ground Skull, it combos into 2 Ground Skulls, which means you can use the EX, which means you can do this. So a 25% combo, because you got hit by a low projectile that comes out super fast and is super plus on block. So that's already pretty toxic. But we can set up low hat, do a triple skull, and then the hat, and then if you get hit by the hat, or the Ground Skull, you take all of that. So, if, for instance, our opponent just messes up, we go set it up, fire our skulls. Now, they took all that damage just because they got hit by the low hat. And even if they block the low hat, it is so plus on block that we've actually created a frame trap from full screen using our Ground Skulls. So, if they fail to block the Ground Skull after the hat, they'll take the standard Ground Skull combo that we're going to do, which is like this. So, almost 23% because you tried to move after blocking the hat. And if you got hit by the hat, make it 25% because the timing is no different on Ground Skull, whether it's a frame trap or the hat hit. Either way, you use Ground Skull at the same timing and lead into the combo. And since Ground Skull combos into itself, even if you don't have meter, you can get about 12% by doing hat, Ground Skull, or about 7% for just 2 Ground Skulls. So even when you're out of meter, you can hold your opponent full screen and hit them for high damage combos with a projectile. The powerful thing about this is that it's just very, very oppressive. The Lao hat comes back so quickly that by the time you're done with a combo, by the time you hit them with a combo from the hat, he's back. And even if you did the full combo, we would say you're going to take... We're going to do the full hat charge. And then combo you. And by the time the combo is done, Kung Lao will be back. Ready to do it again. As you can see, we're good to go. So, an opponent who isn't equipped to deal with zoning like this will just crumble at full screen. In fact, it's very good in the mirror match when Shang Tsung is fighting another Shang Tsung who's more geared to beat somebody who isn't a zoner, somebody who wants to get up close to him. When he wants to be able to react to people who get in range, he's going to pick a Kameo that's a little bit more suited to block pressure or mix-ups. And the Shang Tsung who picked Kung Lao will have a big advantage. One of the big problems with this is that the hat does not beat projectile immunity. It is a projectile. So, when you do something like this, and they pull out Motaro, just tosses the hat right back to me. Just like that. Now, we do have time, in Motaro's case, to block before the hat reaches us, but it does alright chip damage, and now we're the one with frame disadvantage, because we had to block the hat and our opponent gets to move in. Sub-Zero armor is also really bad news. Our skulls won't break it, the hat won't break it, we have nothing. At full screen, Sub-Zero armor just means we have to let our opponent get in. And we have similar problems up close when we do the hat setups. We have situations where the Sub-Zero armor that our opponent might put on as we go to do our setup will mean that our setup doesn't work for our overhead low mix-up or for our block pressure. And we have similar problems with Tremor doing his reflect, and Viltrumite stance, we have no response to it at all with this loadout. And Kenshi's Ancestral Guard, we don't have a good answer to that either. We have to block. And we have to let them get in. And the other thing that the hat does well is that it trades well with crushing projectiles, like Liu Kang's. So Liu Kang has his enhanced Cosmic Flame. Now what just happened there was that Cosmic Flame hit Kung Lao, and the hat hit my opponent as a punish. So, when Cosmic Flame hits Kung Lao, it actually does less damage than if Shang blocked it. So Shang takes 25 on chip damage, and Kung Lao takes 20 when he gets hit. And Shang is still free to move around. So, because my hat's hitting as a punish, I can actually combo off of this trade. So, if I can coordinate myself well enough to do it. You can see that it would have worked, but I don't have the timing down for hitting with the ground skull there. But there we go. Now, for trying to fire a crushing projectile at the wrong moment, you take 25% and I take 2%. So we trade super well with crushing projectiles in that scenario. But you do have to time it pretty tightly, because Kung Lao is not in front of Shang for very long. So you need to time it when you are pretty sure your opponent's going to throw this out, and the crushing projectile will hit Kung Lao instead of hitting Shang and allow for the full combo. If it hits Shang, it's a pretty bad trade. The hat is only doing about 60 damage, and that projectile is doing 120. They did have to spend meter on it, but it is still going to be bad. You're going to get knocked down for a lot of frames, a lot more frames than your opponent will be stunned by the hat. And it's better than just firing straight skulls into crushing projectiles, but it's worse than negating it completely with somebody like Kano, who can run out in front and eat the projectile for you pretty reliably. So, my overall thoughts about Kung Lao for Shang Tsung is that I would not call him the best cameo because I think in several areas he's not providing much of anything. Up close, he is not giving us any kind of block pressure. He is just giving us zoning potential. He is giving us block pressure, but that block pressure is contingent on doing a setup, and that's a pretty big contingency, especially against some characters. Like doing this kind of stuff against Johnny basically means that you're doing it on Oki. You already hit him, and now you're doing a setup to get block pressure or an overhead low thing, and those can be powerful. But when your opponent is calling it out right and has the right answers to these things, you are going to feel real silly for having done it. The other thing that he doesn't really deal with is projectile immunity. If your opponent has projectile immunity, he gets to just ignore everything that Kung Lao is doing other than teleport tricks, and the teleport tricks aren't great. There are answers to those. The things that he is providing that empower Shang are that he's upping his zoning, which was already his best trait, and making it more powerful. And he is giving us full screen frame traps that are fantastic and lead to high damage. He's giving us kind of bad form stealer routes. They do exist. There are a few cameos that don't give them at all, so it's worth considering that he does in fact give them, but they're not high damage, and they're basically just, I want to play as my opponent, and that's the reason I'm doing it. But up close, and when we're already in the melee, Kung Lao is just really not doing much of anything for us. He does stuff when we hit, he does stuff when we zone, but he doesn't do stuff when they block from melee range. So characters like Johnny Cage and Liu Kang and Smoke are people who are always going to get in, and we're not going to have an answer once they do. And the fact that there are several cameo picks that just completely obliterate him. Motaro, Tremor, Sub-Zero, maybe to a lesser extent Frost and Cyrax, who just have projectiles that'll pin you down for a long time to trade with. The fact that these are such easy counter picks to Kung Lao is the reason that I don't think I can wholeheartedly recommend him. But I do think that it's possible to play a very powerful version of Shang Tsung with Kung Lao as your cameo choice. And definitely wouldn't tell anybody like, oh yeah, you picked wrong because you picked Kung Lao. I think you picked a strategy for Shang that is not ready to cover certain scenarios, but is pretty good at keeping those scenarios from happening. And if your opponent isn't ready to make a counter pick, like using Sub-Zero, Motaro, Tremor, Frost, then, and probably Cyrax, then you'll be in a pretty good position, because them switching to a cameo that they're bad at just to attempt to counter my cameo is probably a net win for me. And for some characters, it means they lose a lot. Characters like Tanya don't really function well without their cameos. And, you know, there are several other examples of people who just really, really need them. In fact, including Shang himself. So, I think when you're fighting other zoners, you have powerful options in somebody like Kano or Sector, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with picking those against other zoners, but I do think that you'll end up with more damage from your zoning using Kung Lao than they will with theirs. You'll just have to know that the melee game is what you're really trying to stay away from as when you're counter zoning as Shang with Kung Lao. So those are my thoughts, and that's the video. Please give me a like, a comment, a subscribe, and the head of John the Baptist. See you next time.